Hello, this is Sandy from Environmental Coffee House, and I am welcoming Nicholas Humphrey, our second interview with Nicholas, who is a meteorologist, and we have a lot to talk about. A lot of things happening all around the world with fires and droughts and Arctic ice melt and extreme weather events and all of this whole mix of things. And Nicholas is going to talk about his article, The Great Roasting. Then we're going to segue into somebody that Nicholas found, who I'm now fascinated with, and we're going to talk about that, deep adaptation. So welcome, everybody. Share if you can. This is so important. Hi, Nicholas. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Just introduce yourself, who you are again. And also do a little back patting and tell us where your articles have been lately and what you've been quoted and who quoted you. And then we can go on.
Yeah. Well, I'm a meteorologist, trained as a meteorologist out of, I currently live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. Did some schooling at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln in meteorology and climatology for about 3 years. And then I went to South Dakota State and got my bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies, doing research into human behavior and decision making during tornado warnings. And then I went to graduate school at Mississippi State University and graduated with a Master of Science in Geosciences, Concentration in Applied Meteorology in August of 2016. I've been writing more about climate change and specifically the meteorological side of climate change, extreme weather events, increasing extreme weather events, and their connection to climate change. I currently have a blog up on the website, Patreon. My blog is www.patreon.com/meteorologist Nicholas Humphrey, or meteorologist Nick Humphrey, N-I-C-K. Nick Humphrey, A-N-H-U-M-P-H-R-E-Y. And you can find me under that name.
Goodbye.
But yeah, you can also probably find me in a search on the website as well, patreon.com. And my blog is, officially subscription only, but I've been making the posts public after about 3 to 5 days to get the information out there. But I have it for subscribers so they get the information first, and it helps a lot because I don't make a lot of money, have a lot of money. I'm not employed in meteorology even right now, so this is basically my passion and what I'm doing to bring the information to the public. And as far as my media attention I've had, I was a previous blog of mine on the discussing the extreme heat that was going on at the beginning of the month in northern Siberia, where there were temperatures of in excess of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius near the shore of the Arctic Ocean. That was caught by the Capital Weather Gang, Washington Post, and then that was spread around various news agencies around the world, in the United States and in Britain, in Ireland. I've done interviews for Mother Jones magazine. Did one for the BBC World News Live for about 2 minutes, discussing some of the recent issues with climate change. And then I also did an interview with El País, the largest newspaper in Spain. So I've been doing everything I can, basically on my spare time, to get the information out there, because I feel that the threat from climate change is becoming much more serious and on time scales that affect humans' ability to cope, on all fronts.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing it. So, Nick, first of all, let me say I'm very proud of you, since I've had you were on with us last time, everything just took off for you. And it's your knowledge, skills, and abilities that are doing it. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to have you with us.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Well, let's segue a little bit to this new paper, or the newest, piece that you had written, the burning. What did you call it?
Oh, the Great Roasting.
The Great Roasting. Oh my God.
The global heat wave.
There we go. Yeah. We can start with that, because I'd like to at least get that out and what that's about, and people can find your stuff. But let's hear about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote this, I think, a week or a week and a half ago, and basically, I start off by going over the very recent events that we've had in not only the United States, but the planet. It's focused on Northern Hemisphere because of the focus on summertime heat, but it really emphasizes the fact that climate change is starting to occur at speeds and at magnitudes that are having significant impacts on regional climate systems, where in land areas where people live. So it's almost as if since I wrote about the extreme heat in Siberia, it seems like a distant memory now, because you're having ongoing extreme heat in the Arctic and subarctic of Scandinavia, Northwest Russia, and Western Siberia. You've had extreme heat, near 90-degree temperatures in Alaska and northern Canada in recent weeks. Yeah. This month has been truly extraordinary on all fronts, and also you're getting relative to norms, fairly extreme heat for the oceans. You're getting temperature anomalies, that are 5, 6 Celsius. So you're talking about 9, 11 Fahrenheit above normal in the sea surface temperatures in the peripheral oceans of the Arctic, in the Barents Sea, Kara Sea, the Bering Sea became basically ice-free very early in the spring. And the Beaufort Sea is rapidly, after a slow ice melt, becoming ice-free finally, fairly quickly. So you're having a lot of heat pouring into the Arctic very quickly. And I kind of took people back a little bit. So basically, I reminded people of the fact that this era of climate change that we're in, that one could argue was the birth of still unofficial, but I think it should be official, the unofficial Anthropocene time, the period in which human civilization began to dominate the planet, and do so exponentially. Really began around 1750. You're talking about domination of the atmosphere, domination by just biomass, human population and livestock, take over the land cover, both by cities and by agriculture, and then also the resulting ongoing collapse of biodiversity on the planet. All of that started to begin around the mid 18th century. And so because of that, the earth could take a lot of punishment from humanity for a while, but now we're beginning to get to a point. I focus on climate change and weather, specifically, but also environmental destruction and population and resource, loss of resources, consumption of resources. All of that is beginning to come to a head, here in the early to 21st century. Now on climate change, the United Nations, made it clear early on that the scientific limit that they believed could be handled for the planet as far as humans being able to large life on the planet being able to handle the impacts of climate change, that limit would be around 1 degree Celsius. And that was discussed by the United Nations in the late 80s, early 90s, not 1.5 C, not 2 C, not these limits we keep upping. I mean, the Paris Agreement, they're talking about like 2.5, 3 C. I mean,
yeah,
it was there. The change in temperature is very important, but temperature anomaly limits matter, because after you start crossing those limits, that's when you start to see changes that become irreversible, and they're ongoing changes that you cannot stop. And this 1 C limit, we are blowing past that pretty easily right now. I mean, there was a paper, written in the past, I think it was a couple of years ago, by some climate scientists trying to estimate how warm we were relative to pre-industrial times. And it still may be fairly conservative, even on the upper limit of the estimates, but the estimate, might be add 0.2 C to the 1986 to 2005 average. If you do that, we started hitting 1 C around 1998, which was when that big El Nino event was, that heated up the planet fairly significantly, and caused a lot of extreme weather events for that time. Now 1998 seems like a distant memory in terms of what is happening now, but that was a big deal in that year. And now, since 2014, we began to have greater and greater warming of the planet. I think the planet warmed at least a quarter of a degree in a matter of a couple of years. Some of that was, of course, spurred by the El Nino of 2016, but we have not cooled. The planet hasn't cooled significantly from that El Nino. It's cooled a little bit, but we haven't gotten back to the way we were in 2010, 2011, 2012, and we're keep setting these top one, these top records, top 2, top 3 months and years for heating of the planet, because now climate change, the speed of climate change, it's not enough time to prove it statistically, but in terms of what you're seeing in the climate system beyond the temperature, the acceleration of melting of ice, the acceleration of damage to the boreal forest, the temper forest from fires, the increasing extreme heat events, the increasing weakening and higher amplitude jet stream patterns that are causing those heat events, but also causing extreme rainfall events, pouring in tropical moisture from the tropics into the mid latitudes. It's clear that something has changed to speed up the warming, and the warming itself is always slower than the changes that are occurring in the rest of the climate system. The climate system's changes are always more non-linear than the changes in the global temperature. So the faster you speed up the warming, the more abrupt the changes become in the rest of the climate system in response to that, because everything is so sensitive to the temperature profile that they exist in biologically, in the biological system, the cryosphere, the hydrologic cycle. Everything is very sensitive to the temperature profile. And so, so I go over that in a lot of detail. And then I also emphasize that, 1C, 2C, 3C, those temperature changes those are global annual average temperatures, but those temperatures are much more amplified in land areas. It could be 2 to 3 times warmer in certain land areas. And then in the Arctic, north of 60 north, it's roughly 2 to 3 times warmer. You go up to 70 to 80 north, it could be exceeding 5 or 6 times faster, than the change in temperature globally, and 5 to 6 times warmer. So you have changes that don't seem so huge globally, but they're profound regionally where people live and where people depend on their water resources to be, and where they depend on their crops to grow, and where they depend on the carbon sinks to be, to take carbon out of the atmosphere. And
carbon sinks are being destroyed even in my own area by the state and the county cutting down the forests, and they're supposedly getting a head-on from the beetle that's supposed to be infesting the trees, but it's not. They're cutting the forest down before the beetle even gets here, so that they can remain, so that they can get the money.
Yeah,
so
interesting logic.
After the beetle gets here, the DEC says, "Oh, then the trees are worthless." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what if the beetle doesn't get here?" But it's just things like that. So I have a question about the Arctic melt and the permafrost that's melting all around the Arctic Ocean as well, and the methane. There's other people, commentators, Margot's Healing Corner that's talking about it. Paul Beckworth is talking about it. The methane. Where does that come into the equation of our, burning ourselves up?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't understand about climate change, and I mean, this is, to be quite frank, it's the fault of climate scientists. In many cases they might, believe their own denial, or they might not feel comfortable discussing it because of their employer telling them, we need to focus on this and that. And that's just the way it is. But, it's the fault of, climate scientists, of policymakers. What people don't understand is that you can't stop climate change. I mean, it is unstoppable once you cross certain thresholds.
Crossing the Rubicon.
Right. And it is, I was trying to think before this interview what analogy I should use to describe how I think us as, atmospheric scientists, climate scientists really need to talk about the ongoing changes of the planet. I really feel like we need to discuss it more in terms of a patient that is chronically and terminally ill, more than about trying to always provide, hope of some great thing at the end of the tunnel, because, we always need to be there and, and everything, we'll get there and do this and do that. The reality is that when you put, 410 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, when you even putting it conservatively in a 100-year time scale, which probably doesn't mean much because the concentration of these gases are continuously increasing, methane, nitrous oxide, and others, you add like maybe another, 80 to 90. So you're talking 490 to 500 parts per million. When you put that much in the atmosphere and it doesn't go away, that's enough to melt much of Greenland, much of Antarctica. So even if humans don't get hurt by anything else from climate change, we've just guaranteed the loss of most of the cities on the planet that are on the coast.
But the fossil fuel oligarchs don't see it that way, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Geopolitically, they're chomping at the bit to get
they either don't see it, or they don't want to see it, or they just don't care, because for them it's been all about making money their whole lives and the whole life of their companies, and but beyond that, you've also guaranteed that the planet is going to do what it's going to do to reach a balanced state. We call it a thermodynamic imbalance. Basically it's got too much of carbon dioxide for its current temperature. The temperature is right now is way too cool on this planet for the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere right now. Mm-hmm. It has to get itself to a balanced state. That's how nature works. It doesn't matter whether it's on this planet or 100 million light years away. The universe is always about trying to constantly get itself into some kind of balance with itself. And so you're going, as a result of that, it's doing everything possible to get to that state and do it as quickly as possible. So, and it does it faster the more force you apply to it in the shorter amount of time. And so, we've put so much carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide and chlorofluorocarbons and everything else into the atmosphere, and punch the system so hard, so fast, exponentially, that it's going to rush to get the planet to that new state faster. And it's going to do it that for human consumption is almost discontinuous, where it hits these tipping points, and then in a very short amount of time, it flips and swings and does all of those things very, very rapidly. So you see, these changes in the sea ice. As the sea ice, gets to the point where it's so thin, so low in volume, it may just one summer, in the middle of summer, just disintegrate into nothing. It's almost to the point where it could do that now if you get a big storm going through. The ice is getting extremely thin there.
The Norwegians and the Russians and the Canadians, but mostly the Russians, they could put their icebreakers in storage. They could put them in storage. Yeah, and then as the rest of us suffer from extreme heat, crop loss, damage, they'll all be trying to drink oil and eat money. I mean, the whole thing is overwhelming to me that greed can overtake sensibility and scientific fact and reason, and just not put the brakes on this. Although in my opinion,
and in my opinion, it's affected it's I don't know if necessarily the scientists realize it or not, but it's polluted the science to some degree, at least the science on the side of potentially trying to mitigate or adapt to it, because these realities, these thermodynamic realities, they don't go away, but yet those that want to keep their society stable don't want to induce fear. Part of that fear is economic fear. People participating in the economic system. There's a lot of people that want to make money off of people, So part of that hopium, if you will, that that a lot of so-called doomers talk about, that's driven by trying to keep things as calm and normal as possible. When we are not in a normal, we're not in a normal at all. There's no new normal. There was a normal, and then now there's this transition that speeds up, but it doesn't go away just because you decide, we're going to have these models that don't take into account these, difficult to account for feedback, so we just don't talk about them. They don't go away just because you don't talk about them. They continue to have an effect. I mean, you
don't even know what they are. That's why I'm trying to do what I do. And just the other day, Nicholas, the TV was on. It was a swimming meet, right?
Yeah.
And the advertiser was ConocoPhillips, brought to you by ConocoPhillips, clean, energy for the future. And I sat there and I had to look at this Olympic event and think to myself, how pathetic is this? How are we ever going to turn this ship around when that's the sponsoring agency? Millions of people are watching these things, and yet there's no talk of any abnormality. You watch at Home and Garden Television, and they're selling beachfront houses, and it is just insane. The blindfolds, I call them the blindfolds. People are walking.
Humans. The thing with humans is that we love normalcy. We don't want to think about things getting ugly, but it when you do that, it goes back to my idea of dealing with the planet like a patient, a doctor who deals with a patient. Doctor can say, can say, oh, you're gonna die in 6 months, or he can lie and say you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
The disease doesn't stop. The disease is going to do what it's going to do, and it's just and then it's just the patient's either being told the truth or being lied to, and then the patient is going to decide based on that information how to deal with it. And it seems the problem is that we don't like dealing. We don't want. Some of us don't want others to have to deal with the stress of a climate change phenomenon being something that's beyond our control. And so, with renewable energy, that's all good and everything, but it's not going to take out all the CO2 that's in the atmosphere now. It's going to do all the effects. It'll stop us if we turn off our emissions today. They say, well, it will continue to warm a little bit longer. It will continue to warm because you're melting a bunch of permafrost that's going to release methane and CO2. You're melting subsea permafrost that's going to release mostly methane. You're going to melt the polar ice caps that are going to reduce the albedo of the planet. You're going to melt the alpine glaciers that are going to reduce the albedo of the planet. You're going to, it's overwhelming, but nobody talks about any of the stuff that humans can't control.
Nicholas,
you do.
I do.
But most of the mainstream media and most of the scientists, they don't talk about, even if they research this stuff, they don't really connect it to the fact that the computer models don't account for these processes explicitly. And so, my discrimination of computer models probably comes from me being a meteorologist, because in meteorology, the models can do a lot of things to help you in forecasting, but you have to understand how the models work. You have to understand what they're good at. You have to understand what their biases are. The thing with the climate models is that they don't take into account any of these things. They're bad at sea ice. A lot of them still think the sea ice is going to collapse by mid to late century. I mean, that's nonsense. It's probably going to be a blue ocean, what they call a blue ocean event in the open ocean Arctic, at least for a time, for a part of a season, in the next 5 or years, probably, based on the ongoing collapse. And
these things are real, Nicholas. I mean, I wanted to get this in that I have been called a collapse porn addict. Porn, but you're not even like the biggest doomer out there. No, but the point is that we educate people on what's happening.
Talk about mitigation and talk about adaptation. You have to.
I give all the voices. I have been
the worst, so-called worst of them.
You're funny.
I pretty much made it very clear that I think in that article that we're under threat of catastrophic to existential impacts, meaning we could, this could kill us all, or kill our civilization and kill humanity and a lot of other species on the planet, or it could severely reduce our population, which is also quite horrible. And I can't. I mean, humans are animals. We require just like any other animal, a rabbit, a deer, a bear. We require food, water, and shelter. And it's hard to do that, when you can't grow your food. Humans are not hunter-gatherers largely anymore. We've made ourselves extinct, as some people say, extinct from the wild. We're not wild humans anymore. We've made specialized crops, to feed us and feed our livestock for animal eaters. But you can't. What happens when those crops that are designed to feed 7.5 billion people, they start to not grow anymore because parts of the planet just get too consistently hot. Or too consistently, or the seasonality is lost. I mean, I've already felt that sense of loss of seasonality just looking at living here this year.
That brings me to a question. Go ahead, finish. I'm going to bring you a question that Marcia Noren asked about Nebraska. I'm going to go back to the question. if you don't mind. She says, as a Nebraska resident meteorologist, are you seeing increasing opposition to CAFO operations? They are destroying the ecosystem of Iowa, and Nebraska will be next.
Oh, what's CAFO?
That is,
that term.
I'm not sure either, but I'll look it up while you talk. So finish what you were saying. We'll go back to that question. I'm going to look it up. CAFO. I don't know. It should be on the top of my mind, probably.
But yeah, basically, it doesn't seem like people really, a lot of population, again, because it's not really communicated to them, really understand the gravity of what climate change actually can do to the ability of humans to function.
I'm going to tell you what this is, because it's right up our alley. Concentrated animal feeding operations. So you guys are, it's an animal feeding factory farms, raised in confinement that has over 1,000 animal units confined for over 45 days a year, which is basically, sorry, Marcia. She goes, factory farms. I'm like, yes, you're right, Marcia. Sorry. But they give off an enormous amount. I mean, I've read articles that say that if we got rid of factory farms, we could maybe move the scales a little bit, but I don't know. But what do you think of that? You're right there.
Well, I mean, this is crop and cattle country. I mean, you could go out to Western Nebraska and it's cattle all over the place.
So you have cow burp breathing.
So I mean, any attempt to change anything about that would face hurricane force wind opposition here. I mean, this is like one of the most conservative states on the plains. I mean,
wow.
So
well, listen.
I mean, people eat their giant steaks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know what I thought? Can we, if you don't mind, because I think we were good with this, but let's segue a little bit into Dr. Bendell. Bendell is from the University of Cumbria in the UK, and you turned me on to him. I have not had enough time, but I do want to just give a little abstract, and let's go there. Let's find out what this is, and then we'll see where we can go with this, because I'm fascinated. The abstract, and then you can talk about how you found. The purpose of the paper that he wrote was to provide readers with an opportunity to reassess their work and life in face of inevitable near-term societal collapse due to climate change. The approach of the paper is to analyze recent studies on climate change and its implications for our ecosystems, economies, and societies as provided by academic journals and publications direct from research institutes. So I could go on, but he talks about a deep adaptation agenda, which key aspects of resilience, relinquishment, and restorations are explained. So tell me how you found him, and perhaps where are we going to go from there? And explain the psychological component involved.
I found it because it was literally circulating around Facebook among a lot of my friends that are interested in abrupt climate change and potential catastrophic or existential impacts from it. So I glanced over it last night. I'm actually going to read it again because it's just it's full of a lot of information. But basically, he goes over the evidence that there's, and he actually mentions like I do, 2014 or so as being really the beginning of more nonlinear change in the climate system, and he goes over the recent evidence from peer-reviewed studies to show, the changes in global temperature, the effects that's had on ice, the effect that had on heat and fires, and other impacts that would suggest runaway behavior. He goes over methane and the methane cleft rates, the methane that's locked in ice in the permafrost underwater. In the Arctic, that is under threat of more abrupt release because of warming of the ocean. basin,
Mm-hmm.
and basically, makes a case that, regardless of whether we are headed for an extinction level event or an event that could cause catastrophic impacts to the ability of humans to conduct any sort of organized lives, that societal collapse is very likely, simply because in order for society to function, you need stability, some sort of stability in food resources, water resources, and not to be blasted by massive storms, violent storms that become much more normal. Sea level rise that is, he mentions the fact that it's increasingly looking exponential sea level rise. And he basically goes over a lot of things that I've really wanted more scientists to have the guts to go over, because it's showing that these processes are not linear, and that the inertia in these systems does not last. And so he goes over that. And then after he does so, we assume that societal collapse is likely, organized civilization malfunctions and collapses, that he goes over some of the psychological impacts, including, impacts, the impact of denial. He discusses denial in a lot of detail, psychological denial.
I do have a little bit here that he wrote when he was talking about his insights. And he says the fourth insight is that hopelessness, as its related emotions of dismay and despair, are understandably feared but wrongly assumed to be entirely negative and to be avoided whatever the situation.
Yeah.
And he talks about what Alex Stefan warned, that despair is never helpful. I've been researching him too. However, the range of ancient wisdom traditions see a significant place for hopelessness and despair. Contemporary reflections on people's emotional and even spiritual growth as a result of their way of life or receipt of a terminal diagnosis have all been reported or personally experienced as a trigger for a new way of perceiving self and world. So it's pretty interesting stuff there.
Yeah. The thing about like something of this magnitude, like climate change, is that it's not just about the actual like physical changes that we're going through. It's about the human experience of them and the human response to those changes. Because I've noticed pretty strongly. I really can't find any way of getting around any of these realities, these scientific realities. But I found that a lot of scientists themselves don't want to go down that route. It's not, and a lot of it's not just about not wanting to scare other people. It's also about the story that they want to paint for themselves. Because we as scientists are just as human as anybody else. I have a family, I have friends, I have. I have lots of, things and people and hopes and everything else in my life. But then I see this reality that is climate change and, and ecological destruction. And I can't get around the fact that the way we live our lives now isn't going to last. It isn't going to go towards some new utopia where we will go all to happiness and have kumbaya and everything. It's gonna, it's going to collapse, and we're going to be much more, on our own, trying to figure out how to live and survive until whether we face extinction as a species or populations are reduced to much smaller states, whatever you think or believe that could end up being. It's a heavy, painful subject, and it sort of harkens back to the issues that individuals face when they're in their families and friends that are with them face when they're trying to figure out individually how to deal with death and dying. And earlier I was talking to some people about because there was a video going around on Facebook by Severe Weather Europe showing the fires invading the coast, and everyone huddled around on the coast and stuff on the beaches trying to not get burned up. Yeah, in Greece several days ago, and I was just thinking that we have all this happening, we have these events occurring, but yet we're unable to talk about what these events actually mean. We just aren't able to
connect the
dots, and we aren't able to admit that there's simply an irreversibility to some of these things that we're going to be facing. Just like if you have a chronic illness. I know a lot of people that have died of cancer just in the past several years. My father died last January 2017. My fiance's mom died in August 2013. I had couple other friends that are friends of friends that died of cancer. Cancer is like one of the most.
You're young to be going through this too. Yeah. Our friends are dying, but we're 2 decades different.
Yeah, and so that death's not an instant death. It's a process, obviously, where the person is slowly deteriorating, and then suddenly they reach a state where they can't survive anymore. But that process, the person thinks of reflects on their life. They're depressed sometimes. They're sad. They're angry. Other moments they have where they treasure a moment. And so I think we're doing the kind of as humanity. And one thing I connected with Jim Bendell's article was the fact that was the psychological process and trying to sort of reflect on ourselves a little bit better instead of just being in perpetual denial while things get exponentially worse. And because we need to do that for ourselves, because it's not just about potentially individually dying, because any one of us could die in a car accident that has nothing to do with climate change, let alone getting killed by a tornado or run over by fire.
But the collective change in the entire world. And one of the things, another one of the arguments we're up against is that if in developing nations, when they are not able to get those accoutrements of modernization, which is fossil fuel based, what they're saying is then we're keeping them in, because of the westernized civilized countries are keeping them in perpetual poverty. So we're fighting against that too, that there still is a notion that that fossil fuel living is modernization is something to strive for, and that's in different countries that are developing. So that's another whole aspect of all of this.
Yeah, and I find that the West in general doesn't really, we quite frankly don't give a damn about the developing countries. Most of let's just be honest. They've been, the populations there have been treated like garbage for forever. So I can already see more of that in relationship to climate change, and because you have increasingly more and more populations already trying to leave the tropics for various reasons that people don't think has anything to do with climate change, but there's a lot of things that go on with crop failures and other things that drive people to escape. And Syria was probably the biggest example, and the they're trying to escape ISIS, and they come to America and nobody wants to take them. I remember when here in Nebraska, the governor didn't want to let the refugees come here. It's like they're trying to escape supposedly the same enemy, but they look like the enemy.
Well,
it's just
the enemy ultimately. The United States is behind a lot of all this.
So imagine if you have a major catastrophe in the Middle East or the tropics related to climate, to a climate disaster, say a heat wave of proportions we never faced before, or a major disaster, of some kind, weather disaster that is just prolonged in killing large numbers of people, and large and more want to get out, and they're trying to escape. And they're trying to go to Europe, and they're trying to come to the United States. Maybe some of them are in the tropics. Maybe it's getting too hot, and they want to get north. Are we going to let them in? Is Europe going to let them in? I haven't seen any evidence suggest that they're going to be too nice about it.
But that's racism too. If it was European people ignorant, we already know what the president of the United States said. We want the good people to come in.
Yeah,
meaning
I've tried to. And on a side note, I've tried to emphasize this, and I'll be rather blunt. A lot of white folks don't want to discuss or deal with racism, and I've even noticed that sometimes among those that think of the possibility of social collapse or even extinction. They don't want to think that racism and all these bickering issues aren't as important. They're going to come up if you have social collapse. When you have social collapse, the people that perceive themselves as being superior, or even actually having the money or the resources or the guns, start to try to take control of areas, and they go after the people that they perceive are the enemy.
We've seen it happen during Katrina.
Or alternatively, like in Katrina, a lot of the poor and a lot of poor folks in New Orleans, a lot of whom were people of color. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them, they got left behind. They got left behind.
Wrong.
Or Puerto Rico, they got left behind. A lot of those deaths were indirect deaths from medical problems because electricity failed. And obviously, quicker deaths, they couldn't be avoided because electricity fails after hurricanes, but there was prolonged suffering that led to deaths.
Sure there was.
Or
Is this
heat.
the blueprint, though,
Heat
that
stresses.
we're going to follow? Is this the blueprint we're going to follow in this country? That when there are, catastrophic weather events, that we're going to just be selective in who we take care of? That's wrong, and that's wrong for any country to do. That's just wrong.
And that's part of I think that's part of what we should be hoping for. I'm done hoping about all this nonsense about we're gonna. For me, it's nonsense. We'll just reduce emissions and keep temperatures under 2 degrees, and everything's gonna be. I hope we'll have growth, and that's crap. You're not gonna stop climate change. The climate's gonna do
even by trying anything.
The planet.
Well, not geoengineering necessarily. I do not like the thought of. But they're talking about the big vacuums to suck up CO2. But all of those things are just going to lead. Still not looking at changing the inherent problem is our lifestyles.
Yeah. And the amount of carbon emissions that would be released trying to build the renewable infrastructure for the planet, the carbon sequestration to take the CO2 out of the atmosphere for the planet in tens of billions of billions of tons a year. You have to. It's become too big, and it's already in the processes that are underway are already happening. The only way you can stop those processes is to cool the planet back down to near pre-industrial levels, or even a little bit colder to freeze everything again. And we don't have the capability of doing that.
No, and then we come full circle.
But the hope for me, the hope for me is humans being able to bring out their best in these these disasters and these impacts, because I mean, at the end of the day, we die anyways. Whether it's one person or 10 people or all of us, or all at once. Hopefully not.
No, but it's how we get there. It's quality of life.
It's ultimately our decision on how we want to be as humans, going forward, whether there's some kind of ultimate end for all of us or whether it's for most of us or what. It's the process of, do we treat ourselves with some sort of respect? Do we stand for each other? Do we defend each other? I mean, Katrina was probably for the United States, Hurricane Katrina was probably, well, let's put it this way: Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Katrina had a mixed bag, and Hurricane Maria had a mixed bag of both of the worst and the best that you could see out of humans in one of these mega disasters. Hurricane Katrina, you had, ineptitude, absolute ineptitude. You didn't, lots of people left behind, lots of people suffering, lots of people getting shot by each other. But you also had a lot of people that stood up for each other, defended each other, kept each other from getting hurt, raped, whatever, helped each other get out of town, whatever the case would be. That was the mixture of the best and the worst in humans. Hurricane Maria, same thing, except we got to see some of the worst from our own government.
Right.
Just simply, having an island annihilated and then having a president of the United States come in and complain about their debt. Yeah. And that was what was most important to him.
I have a question. Are you familiar, I ask everybody this, with the climate mobilization? See, the group is something, they're talking about mobilizing communities for the kind of, withstanding or getting through these kinds of events, getting through as best as we can. And yesterday, I talked about that with Vanessa Blakesley, who I interviewed, and a lot of people are really looking at this as something that can unify us in our responses, and maybe there's a way to branch out this. So I'd love you to look at the climate mobilization, what they're doing. Okay.
I haven't heard of them before.
It's great. It's practical. They understand the predicament.
I mean,
it's how to mobilize.
At the end of the day, and he actually, the writer of that article goes into the same kind of statement. At the end of the day, there's uncertainty about what the ultimate outcome of all of this is. Whether we're going to face extinction as a species, whether we're going to face catastrophic, death and destruction, for lack of a better word, catastrophe, or whatever the case may be. But there's also, there's pretty good certainty on the trends, and the trends take you in that direction. And then from there, it's basically the earth and human resiliency and the resiliency of the species that humans depend on, whether we go to A, B, C, or D, or whatever the case may be. So in the meantime, I think humans have have an obligation, if they so choose, to utilize it to do what they can to prepare for the future world. But it's hard to do that when nobody tells them anything about the future. Just like just like getting rid of just getting an electric car ain't gonna do it. Getting a solar panel ain't gonna stop climate change. It certainly will stop you from it will certainly reduce your carbon footprint.
Yeah, but if a lot of people keep doing it, I always talk about local communities. Yeah. Just fix your local communities. I'm
not saying there's anything wrong with doing that stuff. No. Being less polluting to the planet is
a wonderful thing.
It's great.
Right.
You can be just you can do all that, but don't expect it to
mitigate the issue.
Don't expect it to do what you think it's going to do. You know, all of these mitigation measures, they're not going to do anything to stop raging nature. Nature's really mad about what we've done to it. You know, if you want to anthropomorphize nature, it's raging mad. You know, and there's nothing we can do about the rage of nature. You know, it's just a matter of do we move on? How and where do we move to? You know, in a figurative sense, you know. And soon it will actually be in a literal sense, because there's going to be a lot of people on the move, because there's going to be places that you just can't grow your food anymore or get your water. And then, you know, what are we that are still maybe in places that are still relatively sound to live going to do with those people? We're going to bring them in and just deal with the weight of it, or are we going to reject them and be like some of the, you know, refugees we've had recently? I've seen stories of refugees being in some of these countries being sent out into the Sahara Desert to just basically die. I mean, it's just like it's inhumanity of humans to other humans, to animals. You know, for all of the wonderful attributes that people have, there are certainly a lot of bad ones. Yeah. But, you know, I'm not going as far as sitting there saying, "Oh my God, all humans are terrible, they should die." No. I don't look at it like that, of course. But, no, humans aren't terrible. Humans are humans. You know, we have the capability to love, destroy, appreciate, or throw away. You know, and that includes people. Unfortunately, you know, it's just the reality of humans. And I mean, I tried to emphasize in my article that, you know, I think blame for our, you know, this predicament that we're in is really, you know, for the bitter. You know, he's really, I mean, it's just we could blame the oil companies. Maybe we can alleviate the suffering a little bit, you know, but, you know, what are they going to do to stop climate change? They ain't going to stop nothing, you know. What am I going to do? With somebody else that, you know, I've been blamed for having kids. I've been blamed for eating meat. I've heard other people trash each other on Facebook. Like, it's just none of this means anything. Stop it.
Well, but it does in a way. I mean, I do think that we should go towards a factory farm free society.
Yeah, I mean,
all of these things are worthwhile.
It's good to do the things that you feel need to be done for yourself and advocate for those things, but to war with each other over them when we're all going to face the same wrath of nature anyways. That's the waste of time to me. It's really not necessary anymore. I mean, we pretty much, to me, it seems pretty clear where we're going, and it's not good. I mean, you could talk to anybody. You could talk to lots of these climate scientists behind closed doors, and they might tell you exactly what I'm telling you, and they just won't say it publicly. I mean, certainly some of these journalists like, you know, Dar Jamal, he probably he might know more than he puts in his articles, and obviously other, you know, researchers, Kevin Hester, Guy McPherson, he's not exactly, in everybody's positive eye, but he's, he brought a lot of attention to these issues as a conservation biologist. Conservation biologist, he brought attention to the to the biological impacts, which it was never really talked about, because that's where you start getting into, extinction level event and life forms dying because they can't handle the change in the climate system.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's, at the end of the day, we know what's happening. To me, it seems pretty incontrovertible that you can't defeat the the laws of thermodynamics, unless you can take the CO2 out of the atmosphere, which produces a lot more waste and heat and everything else. Yeah. It's just we're stuck with this.
Pure science.
We're stuck. We wanted to have an advanced civilization. The advanced civilization is a heat engine,
right.
And we treated the Earth like a battery, and so we're stuck with the effects of that. And so it's just a matter of going to dealing with the next, what's next, and what's next could be our undoing. Well, it will be our undoing, and whether it's
but we still don't know how long it is. We don't know how long it is when we don't have. Yeah. I don't project. I say live a quality life every day.
Yeah.
Live a quality life and do those things you want to do. Fulfill. I know. I was going to ask you as a closing question.
Yeah, I mean,
where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years,
that's what they do in work. They say, "Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" So I thought, let's close with that one.
Yeah. I mean, I see myself, at this point, I think, 5 years, I see myself, hopefully, this is a hope, I guess, but it's hopefully having enough stability to be able to, have steady employment, be able to raise my kid, continue to raise my child, be able to do the things that we all hope to do. And, the years is almost becoming a probabilistic thing, because I know that I see what's happening increasingly. And so my hope that it's going to be like that is quickly dropping off, but I'm still going to conduct my business.
Yes.
But I'm still going to conduct my business, normally, within, the confines of my, morals and ethics, until the Earth decides that that's not going to happen anymore, either by destroying, civilization, basically, and then I have to do something else, But for now,
and you're young enough too. You're young enough to say and to look into all of these differing paradigms of living. Intentional communities. There's new groups popping up all over about how to live with each other and how to prepare and how to grow in different, kinds of climates and things. So I like that one.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'd say we hit the hour mark. Do you have anything else you say? I think we covered a lot of territory. Does anybody have any questions? I had one actual let's see. Here's one. Alvin says, I don't think because you're not outside every day, but one can make a difference by composting. Every last food scrap, it heals my soil. I do. I compost. The trees I plant from root systems that draw down CO2 curl the earth by as much as 30 degrees. Fake shade is good too. Well, I have to say, Alvin, I do a lot of that here with my, on my little homestead with my husband, and we grow food and we try not to cut down the things and I scream at them, don't take those down. They're a carbon sink. So it's all those little things, those little things, and they're feel good things, but they're all things that affect our community. And I have one more. Mads Bear said, this is memes, not genes. Think about it. Homo has been here for 4 million years. Sapiens for at least 300,000, and we've only been on the destroying path for about 10,000. Any species evolving to culture could and probably would get here. That's an interesting one. So any species, if it hadn't been human, we would all end up here anyway as a destructive force. That's kind of deep. I have to think about that comment.
Yeah, that's a thought of some scientists. I can't remember who specifically, but I know that there's some wondering if civilization, an alien civilization, or any given alien civilization on any planet, in order to be one, you have to do things that that cause a significant amount of waste to build up in your atmosphere, in your water, in depletion of resources on the planet that they live on. So any species may potentially either destroy themselves or put themselves in a much reduced state, non-tech state, because they simply do too much. So I mean, we'll never know, because it's not like we can go there and look. It's just a thought experiment,
right?
But it's a possibility. We know that nothing lasts forever.
No, and we're all going to die anyway.
No system lasts forever, and humans themselves as a biological system, and the civilization we've created as a system, maybe it can't last forever either. So
maybe it was never supposed to.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just one big experiment. But I'm going to end with Lane saying think globally, but act locally.
Yeah.
I think that's apropos. We have to live our days. We all have and hi Vanessa. She says Fermi paradox. I know what the Fermi paradox is, but we don't have enough time to get into that here today. We've been an hour already. I'm glad you joined us, Vanessa. Nicholas, thank you. I really enjoy these with you. Your parting.
Yeah. I think the parting thing is live your life, but don't do so in ignorance. Understand what's happening around you in the world, and don't fear it. It's something to be worried about, something to be concerned about, but don't allow that fear to consume you, and live your life, and deal with things as they come, because that's kind of what we're doing at this point. Even now, we're dealing with things as they come.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm coming back. I pardon me, I was just doing a little housekeeping here. I was actually going to read, because it was interesting. So I'm going to, what she put down, just so everybody knows. The Fermi paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, is the apparent contradiction between the lack of evidence and high probability estimates for the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations. So, Vanessa, you left us with a can of worms, an interesting one for anybody that wants to go there. Thank you, everybody. I hear something in your background there, Nicholas.
Yeah, it's my kid.
Yeah. Come on.
Bruce.
Can she come on?
Not right now. But,
all right. Well, anyway, thank you. I know we'll do this again, because you're our Environmental Coffee House resident meteorologist. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Share. Good luck. And this will be on YouTube, and I'll put up any links. Peace, everybody.
All right. Thank you.